It started with a screaming siren overhead and then, boom, the unmistakable snap of power lines catching fire. I was in the middle of coordinating emergency drone response when my phone lit up with a message from the FAA, but the name in the subject line made me laugh out loud. Karen Mathers, HOA President. Official complaint for unauthorized drone use. And just like that, she had no idea she'd just pulled the pin on her own grenade. I live in a quiet Arizona suburb. Well, it used to be quiet. Desert Ridge Estates. You know the kind. Beige houses, perfect lawns, mailboxes that match the shutters. It was my wife's dream neighborhood, not mine. I'm an ex-Air Force drone pilot, now working for a state-level disaster response unit under contract with the FAA. We use UAVs to scout wildfires, floods, even missing persons. Totally legal. I'd even spoken at the HOA meeting when I moved in, explaining exactly what I did and why they might see a drone overhead once in a while. Everyone smiled and clapped. Except Karen. The first time I realized Karen was more than just a nosy neighbor was about a week in. I was flying my Mavic 3 out over the dry brush behind the neighborhood, testing thermal imaging before the fire season picked up. The next day, I found a passive-aggressive note on my windshield. This isn't Baghdad. We don't need military surveillance in Desert Ridge. No signature, just that stinking floral stationery she used for every HOA bulletin. At first, I let it slide, but then she started getting bolder. She'd stand at the end of my driveway with binoculars, called the police 3 times in 2 weeks, accused me of spying on her daughters, even though they'd moved out years ago. I offered to show her the footage. Hell, I even offered to give her a drone demo at the next HOA meeting. She refused, said drones were tools of tyranny. I thought it was just paranoia, but then she went and filed a formal complaint with the FAA. Now here's where it gets good. That FAA complaint, instead of disciplining me, they laughed. Literally laughed. I had a standing permit, training credentials, and documented mission history. What she had accidentally done was alert the agency to a neighborhood sitting smack in a potential wildfire pathway, one that had been overlooked in recent aerial mapping. My boss called me the next day and said, "You're gonna love this. Guess where you're getting reassigned? You're leading ops over Desert Ridge." I kid you not, Karen's own complaint triggered an FAA-funded mapping and disaster response test, with me at the helm, flying authorized drones directly over her precious HOA jurisdiction. But of course, Karen didn't back down. She started posting on Nextdoor photos of drones overhead with captions like, "Big Brother is watching you." She cornered neighbors on their evening walks, spreading rumors that I was working for a Chinese tech company or that my wife and I were secret government operatives sent to spy on conservative communities. My wife was mortified. I was furious. But more than anything, I was done playing nice. So I started documenting every false statement, every time she trespassed onto our property, every recorded phone call she made to local law enforcement. I submitted a formal defamation complaint through our attorney. But I didn't stop there. I filed a FOIA request on all HOA communications regarding me, and what I found made my blood boil. Karen had emailed board members urging them to explore legal options to force him to move, citing the drones as a quality-of-life hazard. She even proposed a vote to amend HOA rules banning all aerial vehicles within neighborhood limits, even federally licensed ones. That's when I knew this wasn't just personal. It was abuse of power. I contacted the state emergency management director, showed him everything: Karen's harassment, her attempts to manipulate HOA bylaws to interfere with FAA work, even her public smear campaign. Within days, the state issued an advisory declaring Desert Ridge as a high-priority drone mapping zone, citing increased fire risk, and approving my full-time operation authority. I was issued a temporary flight restriction approval for the entire neighborhood, and I had to inform the HOA by law. Oh, the meeting was delicious. Karen stood up, all smug in her mauve blazer, prepared to argue the drone ban, until I dropped the bomb. I read the FAA's statement out loud. Per federal order, Desert Ridge Estates is now an active disaster monitoring zone. Drone operations will be conducted under the supervision of FAA-certified personnel. Then I added, "That would be me." You could hear her jaw hit the laminate floor. She snapped, screamed something about deep state traitors, and stormed out. She called a special HOA vote tried to override federal jurisdiction. That's when the FAA got involved directly. They issued her a cease and desist and slapped her with an obstruction warning, citing federal law. The local news caught wind of the story, and overnight, Karen went viral. HOA president tries to block disaster ops fails spectacularly. My inbox blew up with support. Neighbors who were silent before came forward, thanking me, apologizing, offering to testify against her behavior. And just when I thought it couldn't get more poetic, nature played its card. A week later, a brush fire sparked 3 miles out. High winds. Dry season. Within an hour, it was barreling toward our suburb. Guess whose house was right in the projected path? Using thermal imaging and topographic mapping, I coordinated the drone team to identify escape routes and safe zones. Fire crews used our data to establish perimeter lines. Guess where we set up our command center? The HOA clubhouse, Karen's Kingdom. I walked in with the FAA jacket on, headset in my ear, live feed in hand. She saw me and turned white. I nodded and said, "Ma'am, we're going to need your office for airspace coordination." She didn't say a word. Her house was spared but barely. She later told a neighbor she had no idea drones could save lives. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Karen stepped down from the HOA 3 weeks later. No press release. No goodbye speech. Just a folded resignation slip in the mailbox. The new president? A retired firefighter. First order of business? Official community support for emergency drone ops. Funny, isn't it? She tried to bring me down and ended up giving me the greatest platform of my career. And the neighborhood? Safer than ever. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it hums overhead at 400 feet with a 4K lens and a thermal scope. So now I sit here, sipping iced tea from my porch, watching the sunset glint off the wings of a drone as it rises over Karen's old house, mapping, monitoring, protecting. She wanted silence. She got surveillance, the kind that saves lives. And you tell me, was I out of line? Or did she get exactly what she had coming?